Shanti. Good evening. Warm welcome to this session of Interview with Raj Yogi. And tonight, our topic is part 2 of the power of making useful decisions. As usual, let's start with a reflection. Seated comfortably, eyes can be open in a natural way. And I go inwards, not to try to change my thoughts or my attitudes or perspectives. I begin by going inwards simply as an observer, as a witness to my inner world. Knowing I've spent so much time looking outwards, observing what's going on outside. Simply transferring that skill inwards, but with a change. No judgment, no criticism. A compassionate or neutral eye turned inwards. Looking from a very mature place at the thoughts in my mind, at what I am remembering, the feelings, all the activity, the invisible activity of my inner world, which only my inner eye can observe. Observing from a very calm, quiet, cool place, and with the intention to assess and understand, not to judge, but simply understand. If I cannot look inwards at my own inner activity in a cool, calm, kind way, then I won't be able to look at the outer world that way. A world I move through, constantly having to make choices. Om Shanti. Om Shanti, and welcome. Thank you for joining this evening. Again, as mentioned, this is part 2 of the power of making useful decisions, beneficial decisions. Judy was laughing last week. They call it useful decisions, but it's relevant. If you haven't seen part one, you'll see why,
Mm.
because we think there are a lot of things that are very useful. It may not be. So I feel that if I can recall, we spent quite a bit last week about even what is why it is important, and perhaps it's about this aspect. We may have different ideas of what is important,
Mm.
which is very much connected to what is my understanding and experience of my sense of self. So tonight we wanted to focus on the how to how to develop this capacity and why would I want to develop it. We sort of talked about that last week as well. And perhaps maybe something we had discussed briefly about last week was about soul consciousness, since we're bringing this back to Raja Yoga. And in terms of, would you say that one cannot just really focus on just one singular capacity and say, okay, I want to just develop the capacity to
Mm.
discern? And how can this sort of be taken out of context and maybe not be very useful, I suppose you can say?
Yeah, I was just thinking that now that no, I don't think that these can, different capacities or powers can operate in isolation. Um, with decision making alone, it requires so much the power to discern, and discerning requires that I be in a certain state, which depends on the other capacities. So I don't think they operate in isolation. A huge part, though, when it comes to, I think, decision making is fascinating because it's connected to the idea of actions. What action will I choose to take at any given time? So I'm constantly being asked to make decisions. Even now, just before this session, I had performed an action and, did I make the right decision? Because there's a ripple effect. It sets things in motion. And it's not just the act, but the intention with which I perform it, the quality, the state. There's a lot of shades to the action. No two actions are alike, even if they appear that way on the surface. So the state of the self is quite critical. But the decision making is fascinating because, again, we're asked to perform actions all the time, make choices. And this really is the foundation of happiness, is what type of actions I perform. So it's a big one, the decision making.
Can you clarify a bit more in terms of when you were talking about actions, my intentions? Two individuals can perform the same actions, but there actually can be a lot that's underneath that's different.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, the most simple example that we give is, let's say that someone is going to give a gift. We have two people giving the exact same gift in the same way, but internally, one is in a very needy or empty state. So they are desperate for a return, whether it's an acknowledgement or a thanks or something, whereas the other one's very content and full as they give the gift. So they don't need a return. We know that the law of karma, the consequences, the ripple I set in motion, is very sensitive to the invisible aspects of the action as opposed to the visible. Not to disregard the visible, but it's very sensitive to the invisible. So the intention, the state of the actor.
We talked about the law of karma in another session. It might have been about integrity, but in this context, since we're revisiting it in that sense, could you help us just clarify for those who may not know too much about the law of karma? Because law of karma is can be a sensitive topic. It's like,
Mhm.
what does that mean? That's now I'm sort of getting punished, or I'm not trying to have bad intentions.
Yeah, the law of karma has gotten a bit of a difficult reputation. Um, it's sort of like saying gravity is bad. No, it's just there. And if we do certain things, then it will interact with what we do. The law of karma is a spiritual law. And the idea being, it's actually based around the idea that we are intrinsically good. So, if we are moving away from that state, then the consequences seem to be experienced as increasingly uncomfortable. Um, but we often use the term karma when something bad is going on, which isn't really fair, because the term just means action. It's very neutral, the law of action, the law that dictates actions, that there is some sort of order rather than this sort of chaotic, you know, there's no rhyme or reason to what's going on versus there is some order. And it's not that anyone's bad or anything, it's actually acknowledging we're intrinsically good. And as we move away from that intrinsic goodness, then these consequences make us feel bad. But that's got nothing to do with the law of karma. That's just acknowledging that we're moving away from our intrinsic state of good.
I think this transitions very beautifully in terms of this aspect of soul consciousness, because we talk about it a lot. We're reminded a lot and inspired a lot within our own study to focus on, just that experience of being a soul. Um, could you help illuminate a bit more in terms of just how important that is, so that it doesn't just become, okay, I just want to make good decisions, and sort of have that sort of float in around itself and sort of lose the whole point.
So there's a chain of events that happen when we don't think we're a soul, when we think we are the body or the image. And probably the biggest thing that happens is we develop a sense of self that is false, if you will, not our true self. So things like ego, fear, attachment, greed start to emerge. And these are all just in service of the image. It's not that we're bad or anything. It's just what happens when we cease to be ourselves. So these different um, elements emerge in our personality, and they're quite blinding. We even say, desire blinds, or anger blinds, or fear cripples, or paralyzes. I mean, we kind of know that these compromise the way we operate. So when it comes to decision making, if I'm being crippled or paralyzed or blinded, then this is a problem in terms of decision making. But when I am in that true state, I'm kind of free from these compromising elements. And if you will, we have kind of a clean heart. We can see very clearly what's going on, and we're not trying to, as we say, have these sort of strange intentions. Um, and they're not even our intentions. The intentions belong to ego or greed. And so they compromise our decision making. It's difficult to be benevolent when I've got these ulterior motives that are driven by ego or fear.
Is this how then there is a connection between the discern and to decide?
Mm-hmm.
Is being able to recognize when the intentions aren't clear.
Yeah, we really have blind spots when we disconnect from ourselves. We kind of can rationalize the different sort of poles that ego or greed or fear are creating. And so we develop these blind spots, so we can't really see clearly because of the force of these different poles. So to become free of those so we can see more clearly.
Sometimes it feels like souls can feel quite paralyzed, though,
Mm.
in the sense that, like, oh, My intentions are clean. Now I don't even know what to do. I should just not even make any decisions. I should just close myself in my room
I
and
should
just
not
not do
act.
anything.
Yes, there is, of course, we know a branch that decide we'll just stop acting. Just don't move. Don't even breathe. And of course, that's not sustainable and that's not happiness. And that particular branch doesn't really believe in happiness. So that's not really kind of facing the problem. Um, so it's really about taking that responsibility for our inner transformation so that we can start to perform outwardly rather than ignoring or kind of trying to escape the whole thing. And I feel that the more that we get to practice soul consciousness and the more trust we develop in ourselves, we start to make decisions that feel peaceful. And then we realize, we're not so afraid. We actually look forward to expressing the true qualities of the self, where before we might have avoided actions, okay, I'm not going to say anything because it will be stupid, which is ego speaking. It's now going to be, no, now that I feel very connected to my true self, out of love, I want to share. So it actually makes acting quite enjoyable, decision making quite enjoyable when we are connected to our true capacities.
It's a journey, so it seems to be a lot of preparation for it and focusing on soul
Mhm.
consciousness, which may have discovered is quite incognito. So, would you feel that being a detached observer for a bulk of the time, because there's so many other ulterior intentions we have, that it's not our intention, and all the stuff that's going on inside, and we want to be able to have the kind of capacity to make decisions that are clean, but just to get to that point, the role of being a detached observer.
It really is. I mean, we talk about detached observer as soul consciousness, but it's also a part of learning that anytime I'm studying anything, I'm learning a new art, in this case, the art of just living. But anytime I'm learning an art, it's a learning thing. So there's going to be a learning curve and constantly just being an observer of the self. So I experiment, I see what happens. This is all under detached observer. See, understand, the idea that I just want to understand, I just want to learn. So it's a space, it's a very important awareness that's free of judgment or fear.
I know that we were going to touch upon the how in terms of power to decide.
Mm-hmm.
For yourself, what was your experience like before you came in the study? Was making decisions easy? Um, what was it like coming, into the study, and how does one tell the difference, if it's any different? Because there's some who says, "Oh, I have no problems making decisions in my life."
Mm. Yeah, I'm sure it varies for people. But it comes a bit back to soul consciousness. Um, Self trust is such a huge part of decision making. And what sometimes happens is, it's a bit like multiple choice exams.
I was
Is
bad at that.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. It's a fast because it's a huge decision making thing. And yes, it may not be compatible with how I function or learn or express. But one thing that seems to happen on multiple choice exams is we read it, the question, we look at the answers, and one just pops out. We say yes, and then the second guessing starts. There was one exam I had to do. It was, oddly enough, it was a multiple choice exam for fitness instructors, which I know seems odd. That what on earth? I mean, it's so physical. But you had to take this multiple, and it was notoriously, the exam's notorious for being confusing. It's just known in the industry that it is. You have to get a certain percentage. People squeak by. It's just known that I literally laugh because it's just so so well known that it's just confusing. It's just constantly trying to mess with your mind. And I remember going in and being the detached observer, watching this amazing process happen inside of reading the question and seeing an answer and then second guessing the answer and wondering what were they really asking, and you can interpret that question. So I mean, it's just crazy what goes on. And after a while you say, you know what, I don't care. I just want to trust myself, right? I just want. So this can happen to us in life, is that, and then, these moment there is just a little crack of self-doubt, then the ego moves in, the fears move in, the attachments move in, everything moves in and occupies that crack and widens it, and starts to, these crazy voices start to. So what I discovered is very often I knew exactly in my heart what I needed to do. Either I was afraid to do it, or some self doubt crept in, or usually, yeah, it's usually just a self trust thing. Well, no one else seems to be doing it, or okay, well, that seems crazy, or, so it's
So image plays a role too.
any form of body consciousness can play a role.
Saying so that souls are aware what things
Absolutely.
are.
Yeah. And really undermine the self trust. But I think deep down, we know that that is not a good idea, or that is a good idea. We know it. And yet, even habits can force us to, I didn't mean to do it, force us to act, make a choice that if we're addicted, then we can actually choose to do things that are quite self destructive. So, but I feel that deep down there is a knowing of what is probably not a good idea or is a good idea.
This, I think, is a beautiful way to start just transition to the aspect of silence, the importance of silence, or what is the role of silence in terms of making decisions, also the discerning piece, especially because silence also has sort of a loaded idea.
I know that for myself, when I really felt like I'm grappling, this was before coming into Raj Yoga, grappling with something, there would just be this instinct inside, I just need some quiet time, to just sit with myself and just, and you could call that silence if you want. But this sort of going into a little bit of a space which is a bit like a retreat into the self, a space that is clean and free of all those different pressures from inside or outside, just really wanting to go into what we call an honest space. When we come into Raj Yoga, we know that silence is a space of truth. But really, we just have a pull. I just want to go into a space where I can have a very honest conversation with myself. I again think many souls have that pull when they're grappling with a decision. Yes, there might be image, fear of failure, all sorts of things that they see, and it might say, you know what, I'm not ready to do this right now, and that's fine. But at least it's coming from an honest conversation with the self.
Could you just help connect what the connection is between an honest conversation and how silence emerges within?
It's funny, sometimes I've heard souls say, I'm being honest. I don't know how I could be any more honest. And usually, honesty is connected to truth. And yes, I was pulled to be honest, but I didn't have truth before I came into the study. I did not have truth, and silence is connected to truth. So silence is a state where really it's only the eternal is being experienced. Truth is that which is eternal. So that's really what silence is about. Truth resides in silence. So these timeless experiences, for example, I am a soul. So now, rather than it being hit and miss, okay, I'm going to have an honest conversation with myself, and it's very hit and miss. There's different fears and forces. Now it's quite methodical. Okay, I want to go into a silent space to really hear that voice of wisdom from within. I know exactly what to do now. I need to experience something eternal or timeless, such as I am a soul. It will take me into that space where I can see more clearly and be more honest. So when soul says, I don't know how I could be any more honest, it's, well, I would need to go into an experience of truth to be more honest. But if I don't have truth, then yes, I can't be any more honest. If I don't know I'm a soul, etc., then there's a ceiling.
I know we probably bring this up nearly every
Mm,
session, but just imagine myself as a point of light.
right.
How is that connection then in terms of what real silence is like, and
Mm.
perhaps maybe again trying to go into that experience, but it's not the real thing?
So what happens is that we try to straddle two worlds. So I say I'm a point of light, but I'm still really feeling I'm a body. Because what is far more interesting about saying I'm a point of light is I'm also saying I am not this body. And that's the piece we don't really go into. We just go into I'm a point of light and don't realize that that implies I'm not this body. And it's the I'm not this body part that's the really interesting part. Because when I say I'm not this body, that means I'm not the relationships, I'm not, the possessions, I'm not all this stuff. My entire life it's a lie. I'm not this. And that whole experience I miss. I'm just happily imagining a point of light in my forehead, and what that signifies I'm totally missing. And it's not until I go into that. So we actually use the term dying alive, which sounds very extreme, but until I go into that experience, I won't I won't be able to go into silence, because silence means there isn't the sound of my car, my relationship. None of that noise is going on. And so even this idea of going to God and saying, help my son, that's not silence, and that's not really a connection to God, because there is no my son if I am soul conscious. So to say I'm a point is one thing, but it's also saying what I am not. And it's that piece that we don't really experience. So I'm not really experiencing it at all, right? I'm trying to keep both worlds. I'm a point, but I'm still Judy. No, no, Judy goes bye bye when I say I'm a soul. Judy belongs to the body.
There's a lot of silence retreats being offered all over the world,
Mm.
regardless of the school of thought or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this is actually a touchy topic
Mm.
to discuss about, because silence, you hear that a lot. Let's just
Mm-hmm.
say, even scientists talk about they need silence. So, what does one do?
The former head, spiritual head of the Brahma Kumaris, Daddy Janki, who, as we say, transcended her current corporeal form recently. She used to talk a lot about not thinking. And this is the classic concept of silence, not thinking. So it gets very confusing when she's but if you really listen, you kind of know what she's saying. It's an incomplete sentence because she's thinking a lot. And in fact, the destination of Raj Yoga, we say, is man above, where my mind is quite full. But the question is, what is it full of? So stop thinking about temporal things, body conscious things, and think about spiritual things. Think about who I am, who I belong to, the big picture. She was constantly thinking about that. But when we think about the other things, there's worries, there's fear, there's anxiety because of attachment, etc. So it's a beautiful. I could be walking, moving around. I could be in a rock concert. I could be in all sorts of quite externally loud situations and be enjoying beautiful silence because I'm in the experience of being a soul, that all of this isn't mine. It's that freedom from mind. So we often connect liberation or even mukti, liberation with silence. What am I becoming free from?
So it's that experience where I'm not identifying with
Yeah.
things that are not actually mine, but it's not a intellectual
No.
exercise. It's a reality I'm
Hmm.
returning back to.
Yeah. If I can sit again, the whole idea at the beginning of a detached observer of my inner world and just watch, what do I think about all day? And how much the word my is driving the noise in my head. You know, my experiences, my job, my family, my stuff. It's just driving so much of the thinking. So silence is where this my is completely transformed. That silence.
Can you share now more? Because now we're talking about the how. What happens then in that silence? Because there's not my this and my that. What does that clarity look like, and how does that help one discern what's real and what's not real, or meaningful, not meaningful,
Hmm.
and to make decisions then?
It's quite indirect because what's happening is we're not actually focusing on the decision directly. What, at least this is my experience, what I am experiencing, focusing on is the eternal qualities of the self. I'm moving into a very beautiful alignment, which we often summarize as extremely peaceful. So the mind becomes undisturbed, like clear water. I'm free from ego, attachment, and it's not that I'm empty. They are replaced by the eternal qualities of the soul. I'm deeply experiencing that. And it's quite remarkable in that state. It's called a pure state. We're very sensitive to pure decisions, very sensitive or benevolent decisions. And it's not a case of, it's as if we just operate differently when we're in those eternal qualities. And it's almost as if we can, without thinking even or analyzing, we can feel what is right, feel the right timing. So when I'm in that state, I operate differently. And my decision making, even the way we make decisions, because very often when we're body conscious, we are thinking and thinking and thinking to make a decision. But when I am so peaceful and so free, it's like it just emerges in the head. We can feel. And I don't, it's not that I thought my way into that state. There have been times when, sort of seeing things happening and I should do this or whatever. And then I just take a second to go into that very free, quiet state. And immediately it's like, no, don't do that now. And I didn't think my way there. It's just a shift in how I function.
It seems like there's a power. I also develop power to trust myself as well. But when you were sharing about that piece, I think we talked about it last session, but um, it seems like there's a connection between contentment, a fullness,
Mm-hmm.
and silence. Because I was going to ask, how does one tell the difference from just listing the pros and cons to make a decision versus what you're talking about? And is there a sense of maybe looking for outcomes still when you're just trying to think of the pros and cons versus really making a decision that's, it's such a different way how we, I won't want individuals to think this is a technique, but this is just the way we originally operate.
Yeah, it's quite beautiful how, as a soul, and when we're in that eternal state, we are described as Sat Chit Anand. is how we are, you can describe the experience again of being a soul as Sat Chitanand, and especially this term Anand, bliss, which means deep contentment, beyond actually happiness or sorrow, deep, deep contentment, where you actually have no desire in the mind whatsoever. Doesn't mean you're dead or have no drive or interest. You just are, you're not driven by desires. You're just so, your decisions now are going to be based on the eternal qualities of the soul. In a very natural way, it's what is peaceful, what is loving, what is powerful, what is truthful. Naturally start to drive how we operate rather than what I want, what I need, what I miss, what I
What's in it
lack.
for me?
Yeah, it's a completely different driver. So definitely, if I can spend time in the eternal state, which is in silence, this completely transforms how I operate, including decision making. So again, why we can't separate the capacities, because the first capacity is to withdraw, letting go because of experiencing something different, and how much that fills the soul, the tolerance, the contentment. So now I'm in a state to see differently and decide differently.
It helps for one to really understand what I need to really develop. It's my sense of self experiencing who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that that's where a lot of times the misunderstanding happens. Okay, let me just focus on just making decisions better, or I don't know, I guess you can take these capacities out of context and miss the whole point.
Yeah, no, first off, everything's always, I've always enjoyed the goddess. We sometimes connect with the entry point, withdraw as Parvati. And I've always been really the one who is told the secrets and has her own little retreat in order to experience those secrets. That's kind of the starting point. So we say, I need to experience the secrets of truth, what is eternal. That's the starting point of activating these capacities or powers in the soul. So we just put them together as soul power. I think it's important to acknowledge that they are powers or capacities of the soul. So if I'm talking about the power to decide or to tolerate, yes, but they're capacities of the soul. So I need to be soul conscious to access these capacities. I can't just say, okay, I'm going to just technically do better decisions and I need to focus on decision making. It's like, no, I need to be soul conscious and my decision making will naturally improve.
Thank you. I think there's some other topics that emerged from our conversation. So we're always eyeing the chat box if there are ever any questions, but maybe we'll just remind souls again, if you've only just recently joined, if you have questions, you can share them in the chat box. If you have questions after the fact, you can email the center. If you have topics that you wanted explored, you can let us know again through email. So perhaps maybe we'll have a little reflection.
Whenever we are faced with a decision, spirituality tells us that there is a primary decision that precedes all other decisions, so that I can never say I don't know what to do. That first decision in every situation I need to make is the decision to go inside and remember I am a soul. Whatever I am facing, to always make this my first decision. Go inside. Remember I am a soul. a complete reframing of the self that also allows a powerful connection to silence and to God. And in that state, any other decisions about situations will come from a completely different place. Just as we say, I need to think before I think, I need to decide to be soul conscious before making any other decisions. Om Shanti.
Thank you, JD, and thank you for those for joining. I think it would be very lovely to have explore the topic of silence actually at one point in time, because I think it's something that's really, really essential that we can sometimes put aside. So, all right, I'm going to pass it back to you about upcoming sessions. It's always like a pop quiz for you.
It is. So I do know that Thursday we have another drop-in public meditation, 6:45 to 7:30, and Sunday, full hour, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. So great time, great way to experiment with silence, with the experiences of the eternal. And then on Saturday on the Zoom platform, and that would be on our website, the link, we have inner fitness 2 to 3. This Saturday, the topic is healing. So that's every Saturday. And hopefully, our February calendar, our February calendar will be available soon. So stay tuned and we'll update the website. I know some of it is updated already. So stay tuned. Many of the regular programs will continue. Tuesday and Thursday meditation, Tuesday night interview, Saturday inner fitness, Sunday meditation, and I believe we will be adding a workshop, at least one workshop in English, but there's a lot going on in Hindi as well. So check our website for all the details, and thank you for joining this session. Om Shanti.